Okay, morning everyone. We're going to get the webinar underway now. There's still a few logging in, but we'll have to get moving. So, topic for this morning, tips and tricks and improving the productivity within Edgecam. Mike's going to do the live demos if you like. I'm just going to have the easy bit today and talk through a few slides. So let's move on. So I'm going to start with turning. I'm going to have a look at some of the functionality in there that you may or may not be aware of. Rough turn cycle. I'm going to look at some options for clearance angles and resetting picks. Swathe command, very useful tool within the turning cycles, much ignored and maybe not aware of. And then some tricks for overriding some clearance angles. And the finish groove cycle was something we brought in maybe 3 releases ago. Just to recap on that, some people may have missed it and there's some functionality in there, just want to highlight. I'm going to then move into the simulation and look at magnifying the simulation area. Again, sometimes gets picking depths directly from the model within the cycle, and then working with geometry. When I say working with geometry, picking edges rather than creating geometry, picking the edges direct from the model. So I'm going to pass to Mike now, let him do a live demonstration of them topics. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, yeah, thanks, David. So, although this subject is obviously turning, as you can see on the screen, a number of these enhancements and some of these tips and tricks are relevant to the milling environment as well. So first of all, you can see that we've already pre-machined as parts. One thing I really like to do is just to do a swathe command on off, so just to trace where that particular tool has been. So that's always very useful. Remember to turn it off again because it's not a dynamic command, it doesn't update. What I want to do, I've got a perfect cycle here, so I'm going to copy it down and ask Edgecam to machine the other part of the component. So obviously control key, drag, drop. So we've got a complete copy of the first command. And of course what I wish to do is I wish to edit this CAM instruction number 8, the rough turning cycle, and ask it to go ahead and look at the backface operation, the backface feature. So of course I'm going to use the reset all picks. That will clear the geometry picks, in this case the feature that was picked in the initial instance. Now I'm simply going to say this is the feature that I wish to now machine. And of course I want to start over here and stop over there and then finish. We get a little bit of message, we can just ignore that. But of course what we can't ignore is we've got this trouble here. We've got the tool going way too far. In fact, it's going into the chuck, as you can see here. And if I just do an unrender, you'll see that we've actually gone through the part as well. So not a good start. So how are we going to get around these sort of problems? Well, first of all, let's look at the chuck collision. We could, of course, move the star and the arrow, the start and the end point. But do remember at 2018 R1, we introduced this collision check command. So this will automatically pull the tool away from the chuck area. So that's one problem solved, but we've still got the problem over here where we're obviously colliding with the part. And this has been done simply because I've told it to. I've not really paid any attention to the start point of this tool, nor have I considered the fact that the stock is at the reverse side of the component. So again, we could move the tool if you wanted to, but a much better solution is inside the rough turning cycle. There's a really nice command here, which is called adjust the start point, and this will pull the tool across into the correct position, and now we've got 99% safe tool path. Okay, so as we watch this tool descend into the cut, it's not at this stage perfect. What would be perfect is that as we descend into the cut, we're going to scrape the back of that tool. Okay, it's probably going to judder and certainly cause a lot of tool wear. So what would be a nice idea if we introduced an extra angle? So we can do that 2 ways. We can use the override angle command. So I'm just going to activate it here. And what this will do, it will temporarily make Edgecam use these angles and not the angle of the tool. As you can see now, we've got a better entry of the tool. That's one way. I'll just turn it off. Just let it refresh itself again. So we're back to where we were. And now another, and maybe a more traditional way of doing it, probably the most economical way of doing it, is by using the clearance angles in the tool. So we're saying, as well as the 93 degrees for a C&MG, let's add on a little bit of clearance at the front and at the back. And what that will do now is that will give us a better entry position of the tool. So now again, let's just watch that tool. So I'll use the simulation window on the base here, just pause it, and we'll just drag it across. And now you can see that entering at a slightly different angle. So that's a much nicer idea. Now that reminds me to talk about the simulation window. Did you know that you can zoom into this simulation? So if I just simply hold down my shift key on the keyboard and now pull the simulation over, what you'll see is there's a blue stripe behind that particular simulation drag button. And if I now click on the far right hand side, the magnifying glass, that now means that Edgecam is completely concentrating on just that period of time and nothing else. Go forwards, go backwards, but it doesn't matter how much play I do on that particular area. It's just that period in time where the simulator window is looking just purely and selfishly at that area there. And that's done by that small little magnifying glass on that left hand side. If I just turn it off now, on the right hand side rather. So it's a shift, drag, that's marking time, and then hit the magnifying glass, and then it's just going to just selfishly play just that period there, nothing else, and turn it off again. Okay, so that's our, if you will, preparation, rough turning done. I'm going to now look at the area where we're seeing the grooves. Just got a question there, just came in. Somebody's asking about not being able to hear us. If I just, obviously they can't hear me, there's no point in me saying this, but if I just go back to that screen, for the person who's just gone and done the question, I can't hear you, that's the reason you've not clicked your audio button. I'll just leave that there a second or two. Okay, let's go back to the demo. So I'm now going to do some grooving in this area. I'm going to ask Edgecam for a grooving tool. And another little tip or trick here is that we can ask Edgecam just put the first number letters of the tool name in the tool store. It will search and find that straight away instead of you having to go through a long list of, in this case, grooving tools. So we've selected that grooving tool. I'm going to do some finish grooving. And this groove, as you can see, is very, very narrow. It doesn't really justify doing any pre-rough grooving. And we can do that now inside Edgecam because we have the pre-finish plunge command. So that will do a stab in the center, and then it will execute the normal finish grooving cycle. Just have a look around, things are okay. Question, where is the feature? Here it is, start there, we'll start to the left. Little observation question about the size of the groove, but it's fine in this case. And what you'll see now is it will just simply sink its teeth into the center, and then it will do the traditional one to the left and one to the right. So that's the finish grooving cycle. Remember the pre-finish plunge, very useful. Another thing that people like to do when we're grooving is to change the gauging point from secondary across to primary, especially when you've got extremely accurate grooves. And that's done it. If we watch very carefully the red tip on the tools on the right hand side at the moment, now it exchanges to the left, so that's exactly what we want to do. But we do have a problem. It says here there's a register setting that's not worked correctly. Amazing the amount of people who actually ignore the feedback. The next problem would be if we went to generate code. So if I just ask Edgecam generate code selfishly and only for that particular tool. And what we'll see when we look at code is that the code would also indicate to us that we've got a problem. You see this here. So lots of people can check the checkbox and ask it to do that change. But Edgecam is obviously giving us a command that there's a problem. And the problem is that we've simply not told it which particular secondary offset it's using. It's going to use, in this case, number 4 offset for one side of the tool, but it needs a second offset for the other side of the tool. And now you'll see now we don't get that feedback problem. You may notice that also I didn't have to do a move to tool change. That's been done automatically for me. So my next piece is going to do some milling, and I want to go and say pick a face mill. So we're just moving off inside the tool store, picking this particular face mill. And this face mill in this case is driven and it is radial. But if you notice on the left hand panel, it's already done the move to tool change for me. So again, a nice little tip or trick here is remember inside your preferences area, you can request Edgecam to keep doing a tool change for you, force rapid to the tool change. Saves a couple of seconds, but of course lots of tool changes mean that you're going to have lots of time saving. So I'm going to do some machining with this. Obviously in this case it's in the wrong orientation, so I want to do move angular. So this is all very bog standard Edgecam. Move it around. I'm going to just mill this area here. And if I was to mill this area, normally I'd say to myself I need a feature, but I don't really have a feature. There's no convenient feature in milling that would do this for me. It's like a tapered open face. So what I'd have to do is retreat back to using wireframe, because I know that inside my profiling cycle it will entertain the idea of doing wireframe. But of course that means, do I have to create geometry on this solid model to do that? Well, the answer is mercifully no. Did you know nowadays you can just simply select the edges or the loops of a solid body and it will machine this perfectly for us using the wireframe function. Because I'm in wireframe, I obviously can't do association, so now what I need to do is I need to fill in these boxes here, the level, the depths. And of course, because I don't want to down tools at this stage, rather than have to find out the values, you can do them on the fly. You just make them say pick. So that's another nice little tip or trick. So here's the usual questions. What are you machining? So I'm just going to, as you can see here, chain the edges. There's no need to have geometry in those areas. Where's the level for this command? I can pick this area here. Where's the clearance? I can say with reference to the same spot, remain 5 millimeters above. And then finally, where's the point for the depth? It's there. And what that's going to do for me is quite cleanly and easily profile mill that area for me without the need to do any type of geometry preparation, certainly no features, didn't have to know the levels and the depths, because of course Edgecam has now gone and backfilled them for me. See how it's filled these in for me? That's by doing the pick. Okay, so that's a number of small tips and tricks to say some of that information, certainly the picking the edges of the solid body, that could have been achieved inside the milling environment as well. Okay, so I'm going to wake Dave up and we're going to ask him just to move through on our PowerPoint to our next area. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Mike. Some nice useful information there. Yeah, moving on, tool path regeneration, always a problem when you edit a cycle at the top of the sequence and it carries on and regenerates all the rest of the cycle. So we're going to show you some tips on improving that and making life a lot easier and faster for yourselves. Background processing, again, this can be used to allow you to carry on programming while you're waiting for cycles to regenerate. Or calculate in the first place. Suspend NC, we often get asked about outputting certain sections of a sequence. As Mike just demonstrated there, you can output by tool separately, but what if you wanted to do maybe 2 or 3 tools, a section of the program only? Well, we've got tools within Edgecam to do that also. We're using suspend and resume NC code. And also, we're going to look at organize the sequence a little bit better. setting the sequence into groups of maybe grouping by tool. You can create your own groups with roughing and finishing cycles, or whichever way you want to do it really. So Mike's going to demonstrate these options in a second, and then a couple of little nice options that you may have missed or forgotten about within the machine simulator again. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Michael.
Okay, thanks, David. So we are watching the chat window, so we don't think we've seen anything of any. Well, actually, I haven't seen anything coming in at all yet. So that's always a good sign. Right. Okay. So we've changed tact into doing some milling. We're just going to talk about some productivity boosting tips and tricks here. First and foremost, background processing. Background processing is a real time saver, and people should be using this. What's the idea of background processing? Well, it does what it says on the tin. Puts the processing into the background and enables you to work on. You can always spot a file that's got background processing because you can see this little marker on the top. And if you look at the start of the sequence, if I just edit the sequence, you'll see that we've got this background processing already created. So that was done when we started the sequence. You can move the position. Every toolpath begins and ends at the same position, so it's called set safe start point. Now I might have trouble trying to find that on my menu, so remember the quick search. In this case I'm looking for set safe start point, which is the position for a new background processing position. But that's really immaterial here. Remember, quick search, really useful. So let me just show you the benefits of doing some background processing. I'm just going to hide away all these toolpaths. So remember the visible and the invisible command. That's always very useful. Let's clear those out of the way. I'm going to set up a rough milling cycle, and I'm going to be really unrealistic and have a 1% step over. I'm going to have a 0.1 depth to cut. Really going to annoy the boss here. I'm not going to say current stock. So these are obviously very unrealistic values, but I'm doing it for a purpose. Pick the solid body, pick the containment boundaries. There's no need to here. And if you watch now the bottom left-hand side of my screen, you can see it says it's background processing. So it's doing the work, but it's not taking Edgecam away from me. I can now go ahead and maybe do another rough milling cycle, or I could nip back into features and do some feature finding or some setup, but background processing is still running. Now in this case, I may say to myself, what an idiot, fancy putting all those silly parameters in there. So you can right hand click the file or the command and now say stop it. And that will, as it says, stop it in the tracks. So it's very useful. I'm sure there's lots of times where we set something up and then, oh yeah, I've shot myself in the foot there. I shouldn't have really set that up that way. So the background processing will help us in that manner. But as I say, more of a time-saving thing. You can put things in the background and you can keep on working. The other handy item is all about regeneration, and that's another reason why you have background processing. There should be less regeneration when you do background processing, because of course all the cycles begin in the same spot. But another very quick, easy way to stop the regeneration is to say, turn it off then. Simple. So just by clicking that command, I won't get any regeneration. So let me just prove that. If I take cam instruction 15, drag and drop it, no regeneration. Edit cam instruction has now become 16, and ask it to assert itself to the other set of features on this side. That would normally begin to start doing some regeneration, but as you can see, it's not. So I could make all my edits, all my changes, I could make additions, and I don't get any extra regeneration. It's only when I say, and now turn it back on again, that I'll get my regeneration. And it's right and proper that it does the regeneration, because it's checking that every runner and rider, every single toolpath is beginning and ending at exactly the right position. But just by having that little bit of knowledge is always a nice thing, just to hold back that time. Other things to notice that as I go down this list of commands is I have got some quite eye-catching stuff, and I've done that just simply by doing a rename it's always useful if you just put something inside a cycle. Maybe you're passing this to the night shift or a colleague or something. You just put a rename in there. You can type whatever you like in there. So it doesn't really matter what you've renamed it to. So just remember the rename. Another nice little trick I was reminding myself the other day, if I'm up here at cam instruction number 1, I want to go to cam instruction 44 or 30, just type the number in 34, just type the number in 3, 30. It will always jump back to that particular cam instruction, back to 2, down to 6, down to 9. So just typing the number on the keyboard will take me to that particular cam instruction. The one that I want to kind of focus in is, and I've highlighted them just so as it reminds me, is something called NC code output. So let's highlight them here. And that's another good little trick, is you do have the ability to do a highlight. But now they stick out like the proverbial sore thumb. So NC output resume, NC output, what's all this about? So what we have inside the end function area is the ability to say suspend the NC code at that stage. And you might want to do that because maybe on this part the drilling and tapping is already done. So at the moment we're doing a full generation. So when I do my NC code output and we generate the usual file, obviously Edgecam is obliged to code for the whole set of cam instructions, 40 Edgecam instructions, lots of code. So in this case, let's just make a note. I'll wake David up and ask him to remember. We have 4559 lines of code here. Now what I want to do is regenerate it, but this time without, say, the drilling and tapping. So all I need to say is NC code output, suspend it. And that will stop coding, stop the post-processor from taking any cam data between here and here. So of course now I'm going to get a much smaller program. If I generate code again, overwrite the same thing. I'll take it back to our editor. What we'll obviously have is evidence that the editor has changed. And if we now look at the properties, we've got less lines. What was the number before, David?
4559.
4559. So obviously we've got a lot less data in there. And if I do a Control F, which is find, and I just say jobber for jobber drill, there's no evidence of the jobber drills in there. So that's a very nice way of just cutting away data that you don't want to be outputted. Don't want to delete it, just want to temporarily suspend it, then obviously turn it back on again at a later stage. Finally, we'd always go into the machine simulator. We should traditionally go in this way, but there is another slightly quicker way, and that is to enter via going via the update stop command. So if I do a right-hand click over any update stop command, you may notice it says simulate machining. And what that will do is that opens the machine simulator at that very spot. So it actually does the generating in the background, does the toolpath in the background, and as you can see now, I'm in at this stage and I can start playing from that particular stage. So a nice little time-saving command there. And remember section view for the millers. The turners have had this for a while. It's always useful to have that section view. Just peer through the section. Let's see what we have here. So that's the section view. Right-click section view. Okay, so hopefully those have proved worthwhile. We'll just take some time out there. Maybe let's have a look at if we've got any extra chat questions coming in. All right, so far no questions, apart from Chris Davis. Hope we've answered your question there, Chris. So yeah, let's move ahead. And let's resume. And let's go back. That's good. You can see that. And we'll go back to our PowerPoint. and back to David. Thank you, David.
Okay, Mike, thanks very much. Moving on, we're going to look at creating geometry from DXF, DWG files. Still quite a big part of the engineering world, these files, although we'd like to get away from them. Mike's going to show you a few tips and tricks on this. We're then going to take it into EWS, which is the onboard solid modeling package, which you all have. If you're on SMP and you have solids, you will have EWS. Whether you're using it or not, I'm not sure, but quite a useful little tool. And also, we're going to show some macros which come with the software, which I've got to admit I wasn't aware of until recently, but just quite specific, but we'll demonstrate a couple of them and show you what they do. IGES files, again, we don't really like IGES files. We get some really dodgy geometry off them sometimes, but again, we do have tools that will improve the quality of an IGES file and indeed turn it into a solid, which is far better for Edgecam purposes. And then extracting some geometry from this said IGES file. Okay, I'm going to pass back to Michael and let him go through these topics.
Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, so let's begin with the IGES file, as we call them IGES files, because they can be extremely difficult to work with. We'd much prefer to work with a solid file. So let me show you the worst case scenario. We open up a IGES file, and this is what we get. Okay, here we are. So, as well as having lots and lots of blown out faces, which you really, you just can't machine that now without having to repair it, the IGES file comes with a load of surfaces. It doesn't give us any information. Remember V on the keyboard. We don't see any verification. Well, we do see verification, but to an engineer, there's not much information in there for us. So basically, yes, we can machine the IGES file. Certainly couldn't machine that one because the tool would end up going through the blown face. But when you open up an IGES file, those of you with the solids license, that does tend to be 90%, maybe more, of Edgecam customers, you have this facility called load as a parasolid body. And that will now not only bring the IGES and the surfaces in, it also brings in the solid body. So now you can see two. So the actual IGES file is no good to me. I can just kill that off. And then what we can do is we work with a solid body. We can do what we want to do with that. So now we can obviously, we can verify it. If needs be, we can feature find it. And if you remember in my last demonstration, we don't need to make geometry. We can just machine directly off the edges and so on and so forth. So a much more crisper, clearer medium to work with. Just before I lose this file, I always think it's just worth flying the flag for the silhouette command. I want to machine around this part. If I use profiling cycle and pick the solid body, it will obviously try and do it in cusps and cut increments. I just want to whip the tool around the outside of it. So remember that you've got that really nice command, the silhouette command. All you need to do is just pick the solid body, and now if I just isolate that layer, it creates me this continuous. Now you can invite the profiling cycle to walk around the continuous. Of course, you can edit the continuous. You can explode it, explode a continuous, and that will just melt it down into primitive entities, lines and arcs, etc. So again, that might make life a little bit easier for you. So that's working with an IGES file. Now let's work with a DXF file. Okay, so they're still there in the industry. And the first problem we always get with DXF is to clean it up. Oh, I've got all this information on here, and yeah, I only want like 10% of the drawing. So lots and lots of little commands that we can use. The first one, and probably not everybody knows this, is a very, very handy command that we find in the macro area called remove a duplicate. So these are all those nasty lines over lines, entities over entities that we always find in an IGES or DXF DWG file. So we just window the whole thing. You'll see it now beginning to process. It's picking out all those extra entities that to the naked eye you'd never begin to see them. And now it's finished, and now it's telling me I've taken out how many? 105 entities. So that would have been a real nightmare for you to see them and then to delete them. So that's a very, very nice command. File macro, remove duplicate. But I'm still not out of the woods. I've still got some cleaning up to do. So we see lots and lots of text on here, so we can just use the traditional deletion command. And before I lasso, before I throw the window, remember the filter. Always use them filters, so that makes the window only see what you ask it to see. So only go for your dimensions. Just window the whole thing, it will just take out the dimensions. And another nice one is to delete by colour. So I can see here, if I just double click that, I've got lime green. And if I double click the other entity, I can see got gold. So you can delete by colour. So any entity that is of that colour, take it away for me. So we said lime green. Okay, window. And then we could do it again and say take out the, was it gold? I think it was, yeah, gold. So we got a bronze this morning in the Winter Olympics. Shame it can't be gold, but can't have everything. There we go. So that's another way of cleaning the file up. So we're nearly down to the bit that we want to get down to. But you might also want to entertain the idea of using EWS. And what EWS will do for us is it will say, well, here's all your layers. So I can begin to separate the wheat from the chaff by using layers. Then I can ask EWS to extract the solid or extract the edges, which is this area here. And now it will selfishly only concentrate on that bit there. And I can go off and in this case do an extrusion command. And this was the bit that I was after in the first place. This is actually a tool graphics for a special oil ring groove tool. Okay, so that's dealing with that DXF DWG file. The other file that we do come across, again, a bit of a history lesson I know, is DWG. Okay, they're still around the industry, so we still do need to worry about them. So here's a typical one, lots of layering going on in here. So one way is just put it onto a different layer. Use the apply to all command, chain the bit that you're after, which in this case is the outer bit, and just drop this onto a different layer. Let's just call that Mike. So now it doesn't matter what else is on the drawing, I can just hide it all away and say just show the Mike layer, and now I've got the bit that I'm after. That's another way of concentrating on the bit that you're more interested on. That reminded me of a very old trick that it's like I just want to get home, haven't got time to make a program for this, I just want the coordinates and throw the coordinates at the setter operator and let him write the program for me. So I just want coordinates. So again, let's go into this macro area. There's an item here called node profile exit. Node profile exit. And all it asks us to do is to pick the region. The number is for text. So numbers 1 through to 16. So it's numbered every node point on that drawing. And if I go and open up, and I can do this via Edgecam, in the background it created me a CSV file. Notice the date stamp just right now. And what that CSV file is doing is going to give me all the coordinate data for the profile that I've just looked at. So I could give that, print that to my setter operator. They could handwrite the program down on the machine. Just kind of relieves maybe the cam station for you to get on with something maybe a little bit more important. And lastly, yeah, we know the text command in Edgecam. Text command is always going to write straight text. I want curved text. I want to go around this arc here, for instance. So we can again delve over into the macro area. There's a little extra here called create arc text. If we run it, get the usual, what is the size of this text? So I think that's probably about right. Edit. So we'll put something in here. This is just the text that you see on the writing. Doesn't spell check, unfortunately. And then it will challenge me, where is the arc? This is the arc. There we go. It's now put that text on there, and you can machine that text. So what it's actually doing is placing each bit of text individually around a profile or around an arc. So that's very, very useful at times. Okay, so we're nearly at an end. We're just going to have a quick look at our chat window and see what's going on. Can you suspend NC output in more than one place in a sequence? I think you can actually. Yes, you must be able to, because the command is created from the miscellaneous menu. So yes to that question. That's not a problem. No more questions, I think, Dave.
No, that's all at the moment.
That's all at the moment. Okay. We all want to get out. So let's just return back to the PowerPoint, and this is our last presentation of the day. So back to David.
Okay, final section. We're just going to look at creating some work planes. We've obviously gone away from the terminology CPL now, and everything's a work plane. So we're going to look at creating work planes and a couple of different methods for doing this. Using the keyboard to rotate the part, these rotate commands and shortcuts which you can utilize. And align body. We do obviously have the setup browser for basic alignment of parts, but the align body command is a very strong command and can do some extra things if required. So I will pass back to Mike and let him finish off the demonstration.
Yes, okay, yes, thank you, David. Back we go. So as I say, the last one of the day. So we'll go back to using a solid body. It's a parasolid file. And just want to talk about alignment, setting this part up. Maybe for the purpose of the exercise, it would be worthwhile having a large work plane marker, datum marker, even though we didn't improve that 2018 R2 with the coloured work plane marker. Sometimes useful to enlarge the axis, so that's done through the configure view property window. So now anybody can see that. So of course we should be using our setup window here on the left hand side. So no reason why this won't work, but there are one or two extra little things that you get if you go through the align command. So align command will of course ask me which face, so pick the face and it'll lift it up, and the align command will obviously, as it says, align around an axis. So that's very much sure, all very much achievable. Use a setup window. But this last question is quite interesting. Point to translate to, and that just gives me the opportunity to talk about two little tips or tricks. It's quite annoying when you can foresee a hotspot. I'll just hang my cursor on screen there so you can see them hotspots. As I move my cursor towards it, it disappeared. So I want to try and get to a hotspot, or of course maybe because of graphics or whatever, that hotspot's beginning to disappear. So nice little tip or trick is when you see the hotspot, hold down the F on your keyboard. Now the hotspots, doesn't matter where I go with my cursor now, it will latch onto that position. I'll do that one more time. So again, I can see a hotspot, move to the hotspot, it now disappears on me. So once you see your hotspot, hold F on the keyboard. Now I can take my cursor wherever I want without disturbing the hotspot, and you click it and it goes to the hotspot. So that's F on the keyboard. Another one is you can hit the orbital center. So if you just hold Control key down and pick the face, it's now moved the datum to the dead center of that component. So that's Control key, and then just hit the face, it will jump it. So Control key, click the face, gone into the orbital center. And to try and prove that, if I just throw some stock on there without any offsets, it's now in the dead center of the stock. It's the orbital center. So that's useful to know. Now that I've created a stock, you can edit the stock through your feature window. Just double click. You can add sizes through the feature window here. rather than having to recreate the stock. It's quite useful. And lastly, yeah, at last, after many years, I've managed to stop myself saying CPL. We've now got our work planes. Of course, we can create the work planes through this menu here. So it's a slightly quicker way. You can do a nice drag and drop nowadays. You just pick up the marker and just slide it across onto the part itself. There you go. So, and once it latches on, you can grab the orbits and just drive that way, drive it the other way. Or if you just pick the whole thing again, you can just move it to a different position. And indeed, you can actually create the values in here as well. So that's another way of doing it. Okay, so our 45 minutes are up. Hope we've covered lots of different enhancements in there. Not so much enhancements. These are tips and tricks. These are things that you already have. Stuff that is probably lying underneath your nose, but you didn't realise you had it, just simply because we're all busy. We're all doing things day in, day out, so it's impossible to catch up with all this stuff. I've got a question in there from Mark. In Edgecam turning, not in the simulator, in the turning, can you do a section view where the view is capped, i.e. inside the solid? I'm not quite sure I understand that, but you can partially. We just go back to that turning view, or that one, and I'm looking at Dave, and Dave's looking at me. I think we're both in agreement that probably what we do there is a clipping. Yeah. So I go into the. Got to be careful. Got to be careful of which particular datum you're on. So it's going to clip through a certain section. So the clipping command is here, and you'll say clip through a certain position. I've clipped it back the other way, but it doesn't cap it. It will just simply, what you're actually doing is you're splicing it. You're slicing the view through that segment. So we don't cap that area. It's not really made to do that. Maybe a more effective way is to if you've got the part modeler, is to section it through the part modeler, or indeed, shall I say, the new designer. Hey, what's designer? Okay, so we'll leave that one for maybe another one. Okay, so I don't think we've got any more questions, have we, David?
No, that's it. All answered. Thanks for that, Mike. A lot of very useful information in there. Hope everybody's picked up 2 or 3 tips anyway that'll help you in the future.
Of course, I was just thinking there, Dave, that I didn't actually put that on screen, did I? We had the screen turned off over here. Yeah,
so well.
It was so good, that one, wasn't it? Yeah, so we were talking about clipping. You can clip through this area here, so through properties. And I just looked over at our slave monitor and then realised I'd paused the webinar for a minute. So that's clipping. Yeah, okay. Let's end on a high. Okay, so let's wind up. I think we're all there. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Thanks for joining us. Look out for future webinars. And yeah, I think next time we'll be together as 2018 R2 in the next 1 or 2 months.
Not too far away now. Yeah.
True. Okay then. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for coming on board today. Goodbye.
Bye.
Recording.